The snowplow blade scraped against asphalt at 4:30 in the morning, and I knew before the phone even rang that someone was going to complain about the noise. I just didn't expect it to be a 911 call that would unravel an entire web of fraud, corruption, and illegal HOA activity in our quiet Denver suburb. My name is Lucas Wright, and I own Wright Snow Removal, the company my father started back in 1998. We had contracts with half the neighborhoods in Jefferson County, Colorado, and we prided ourselves on being the most reliable service around. When that February blizzard dumped 18 inches of snow on the Denver metro area in less than 12 hours, my crew and I had been working nonstop since midnight. The Pinewood Estates community was our third stop of the night, and we were making good time. I was guiding my newest driver, Tommy, through the main entrance when my phone buzzed. It was dispatch calling, which was unusual at this hour unless there was an emergency or a route change. "Lucas, you're not going to believe this," said Marie, our night dispatcher. Her voice had that tone that meant trouble. "I just got a call from Jefferson County 911. Apparently, someone in Pinewood Estates called emergency services about your crew." I pulled my truck to the side and put it in park. "What do you mean someone called 911? We have a contract with this HOA. We're scheduled to be here." "I know that, and I told them that. The dispatcher I spoke with, her name was Jennifer. She was actually really helpful. She said some woman called screaming about unauthorized commercial vehicles disturbing the peace and trespassing on private property. Jennifer asked for the neighborhood name and looked up their snow removal requirements. Guess what she found?" "What?" "We're literally the only licensed and bonded snow removal company in Jefferson County that's approved for communities over 50 homes. The county requires it for liability reasons." Jennifer told the caller that if anyone was removing snow from that neighborhood, it had to be you guys, and that the caller should contact their HOA board to verify the contract. I felt a headache coming on. "Did Jennifer give you a name?" The caller. "She said it was a Carol Hendricks." The address came up as 4782 Pinewood Circle. According to Jennifer, this woman was absolutely hysterical, demanding that police be sent immediately to arrest all of you for trespassing, destruction of property, and creating a public disturbance. I knew exactly who Carol Hendricks was. She had been the HOA president of Pinewood Estates for the past 3 years, and she was a nightmare wrapped in a pantsuit. Every time we serviced this neighborhood, there was some complaint. The snow was piled too high near her driveway. We started too early. We finished too late. The trucks were too loud. The crews were unprofessional. It never ended. "So what did the 911 dispatcher tell her?" I asked. Jennifer refused to send police and told her it wasn't an emergency. She also mentioned that misusing 911 could result in a fine. That's when Carol apparently started screaming about how she knew the county commissioner and would have everyone fired. I rubbed my eyes. The snow was still falling, and we had 4 more neighborhoods to clear before sunrise. "All right, thanks for letting me know. We're going to finish the job. If she calls back, just refer her to our main office number and tell her to leave a message." "Will do. Be careful out there." I hung up and radioed to the rest of my crew. We had 5 trucks working Pinewood Estates that morning, along with 2 sidewalk teams with snow blowers. Everyone needed to know what was happening. "Listen up, guys. We've got a situation. The HOA president called 911 trying to get us removed from the property. Obviously, that's not happening since we have a valid contract, but keep your eyes open. If anyone approaches you, be polite but don't engage. Radio me immediately." The responses came back one by one, acknowledgments from each team. Tommy looked nervous in the passenger seat of my truck. "Are we going to get arrested?" he asked. He was only 19, and this was his first season with us. "No, we're not going to get arrested. We have every legal right to be here. The HOA hired us to do a job, and that's what we're doing." What I didn't tell Tommy was that something felt off about this whole situation. Carol Hendricks was difficult, sure, but calling 911 on a contracted snow removal company was a new level of crazy. It didn't make sense. We continued working through the neighborhood, clearing the main roads first, then the cul-de-sacs and side streets. The snow was heavy and wet, perfect for building snowmen but terrible for plowing. It kept clumping on the blades, forcing us to stop and clear them every few minutes. At around 5:15, just as the sky was starting to lighten from black to dark gray, a figure appeared in my headlights. A woman in a puffy white coat and fuzzy boots was standing in the middle of the street, arms crossed, directly in the path of my truck. I stopped and put on my hazards. "Stay here," I told Tommy, and climbed out of the cab. The woman was probably in her mid-50s, with short blonde hair that looked like she had just rolled out of bed. Her face was pinched with anger, and even in the dim light, I could see her cheeks were flushed red. "You need to leave this property immediately," she said before I could even introduce myself. "I am Carol Hendricks, president of the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association, and I did not authorize any snow removal today." I kept my voice calm and professional. "Good morning, Mrs. Hendricks. I'm Lucas Wright, owner of Wright Snow Removal. We have a contract with your HOA to provide snow removal services after any snowfall of 6 inches or more. We received 18 inches overnight, so we're fulfilling our contractual obligations. I don't care what contract you think you have. I'm telling you to leave right now, or I will have you arrested for trespassing." "Madam, we've already been through this with the 911 dispatcher. We are the only licensed company in Jefferson County that can legally service a neighborhood this size. If we don't clear these roads, your residents won't be able to get to work, and emergency vehicles won't be able to access the community. That's a liability issue for your HOA." Her eyes narrowed. "I know my rights. You are operating commercial vehicles in a residential area without permission." "That's illegal. We have permission. It's in the contract that your HOA board signed last October. I have a copy in my truck if you'd like to see it. The contract is invalid. I'm declaring it null and void as of this moment." I had dealt with difficult HOA board members before, but this was absurd. "That's not how contracts work, Mrs. Hendricks. You can't just declare a legal contract void because you're upset about the noise. If your HOA wants to terminate our services, that's fine, but there's a process. 30 days written notice as specified in Section 12 of the agreement. Until then, we have a job to do." She pulled out her phone and held it up, the screen glowing in the pre-dawn darkness. "I'm recording this. You are refusing to leave private property after being instructed to do so by the property manager. That's trespassing, and I'm calling the police right now. Go ahead and call, but this time, maybe use the non-emergency number instead of 911. Her face went even redder. "How dare you tell me what to do? I am the president of this HOA. I have authority over everyone in this neighborhood, including outside contractors who think they can just waltz in here whenever they want." Something about the way she said, "authority over everyone," struck me as odd. It wasn't just the usual power trip you sometimes saw with HOA board members. There was something desperate in her voice, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "Mrs. Hendricks, I'm going to get back in my truck and finish the job we were hired to do. If you want to stand here and record me, that's your choice, but I'd suggest going back inside where it's warm. This snow isn't going to clear itself." I turned to walk back to my truck, but she rushed forward and grabbed my arm. You're not listening to me. You can't be here. You're going to ruin everything. I gently pulled my arm away. Madam, please don't touch me. If you have concerns about our service, you can file a formal complaint with our office during business hours. I don't want to file a complaint. I want you gone. Her voice was rising to a shrill pitch now, and lights were starting to come on in the nearby houses. You have no idea what you're interfering with. This is bigger than just snow removal. Now that was interesting. I stopped and turned back to face her. What do you mean, bigger than snow removal? She seemed to realize she had said too much. Her mouth snapped shut and she took a step back. Nothing. I don't mean anything. Just leave, please. I'll pay you for today. I'll pay you double. Just take your trucks and go. Mrs. Hendricks, we have contracts with 8 other neighborhoods to service tonight. We can't just leave because you're having some kind of crisis. What's really going on here? Before she could answer, another figure appeared from one of the houses. A man in his 60s wearing a bathrobe and boots came trudging through the snow. Carol, what the hell are you doing out here? He called. It's 5 in the morning. Go back inside, Richard, Carol snapped. This doesn't concern you. Like hell it doesn't. This is our snow removal company. They're supposed to be here. Richard reached us and extended his hand to me. Richard Morrison. I'm on the HOA board, treasurer. Sorry about this. Carol's been under a lot of stress lately. I shook his hand, grateful for a reasonable person. Lucas Wright, I own the company. We're just trying to do our job. I know. Listen, Carol, we talked about this at the last board meeting. We all agreed to keep the snow removal contract. What are you doing? The board agreed without having all the information, Carol said, her voice tight. There are financial considerations you don't understand. What financial considerations? We budgeted for this. The dues we collected in December were specifically to cover snow removal for the winter season. Carol's face went pale. Even in the dim light, I could see the color drain from her cheeks. That money was reallocated. Reallocated where? Richard's voice went cold. Carol, what did you do? I made an executive decision as president to redirect some funds to more pressing matters. It's all documented. It's all legal. Show me the documentation. Not here, not now. We'll discuss this at the next board meeting. No, we'll discuss this right now. Richard pulled out his own phone. I'm calling Martin and Deanne. If you've been moving money around without board approval, that's embezzlement, Carol. Don't you dare. Carol lunged for Richard's phone, but he stepped back. You have no authority to call an emergency meeting. Actually, I do. Any board member can call an emergency meeting if they suspect financial impropriety. It's in the bylaws that you wrote, Carol. I could see this situation spiraling out of control fast. More lights were coming on in houses now, and a few people were coming outside to see what the commotion was about. My radio crackled with check-ins from my other drivers, wondering what the delay was. Folks, I appreciate the drama here, but we really need to keep working, I said. Mr. Morrison, do we have your authorization to continue with snow removal? Absolutely. Do your job. Carol, go home. We'll deal with this later. But Carol wasn't done. She turned to the growing crowd of residents who had gathered. Everyone, listen to me. This company is here illegally. They're charging us thousands of dollars that we don't have. I've been trying to protect you all from this financial burden. A woman in a pink bathrobe spoke up. Carol, we paid our dues. That's what the dues are for. Yeah, a man added. We were told the December special assessment was specifically for snow removal and road maintenance. Special assessment. That was news to me. Our contract with Pinewood Estates was clear. They paid us directly from the HOA account, $25,000 for the winter season, covering November through March. It was a flat rate regardless of how many snowfalls we got, which meant we took the risk in heavy snow years and made out better in light years. It averaged out. Mrs. Hendricks, did you collect a special assessment from residents for snow removal? I asked. She didn't answer, but her silence was answer enough. Richard Morrison looked like he might have a heart attack right there in the street. Carol, tell me you didn't collect extra money for a service that was already budgeted for. I did what I had to do to keep this community running. Carol's voice cracked. You have no idea the pressure I'm under. The roads need repaving, the entrance gate is broken, the landscaping costs have doubled. I had to find money somewhere. By defrauding the residents. Richard pulled out his phone again. That's it. I'm calling the police. The real police, not 911 for a fake emergency. Carol's face crumpled. Please, Richard, don't. We can fix this. I can pay it back. I just need time. I held up my hand. Before anyone calls anyone, let me ask something. Mrs. Hendricks, have you paid our company for any of our services this season? She wouldn't meet my eyes. The checks are being processed. That's not an answer. Have you paid us or not? The HOA account is temporarily frozen due to an administrative issue. My stomach dropped. We had serviced Pinewood Estates 4 times already this winter. According to our records, we were owed over $15,000, with another payment due after today's service. If she hadn't been paying us, where was that money going? Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You collected a special assessment from residents specifically for snow removal. You haven't paid our company for any of the services we've provided, and now you're trying to chase us out of the neighborhood. What happened to the money, Mrs. Hendricks? A new voice joined the conversation. I can answer that. A tall man in his 40s, wearing sweatpants and a jacket, pushed through the growing crowd. I'm Martin Chen, secretary of the HOA board. Carol, I did some digging after that weird comment you made at the January meeting about cash flow. Want to know what I found? Carol shook her head, backing away. Martin, don't. I found that you've been writing checks from the HOA account to a company called Pinewood Management Services. $20,000 over the past 3 months. Want to know who owns Pinewood Management Services? The crowd was silent, everyone watching this drama unfold like it was a Netflix series. Your son, Martin continued. Carol Hendricks Jr. owns Pinewood Management Services. It's a shell company that doesn't provide any actual services. You've been funneling HOA money to your son, and to cover it up, you collected a fake special assessment from residents and stopped paying our actual contractors. The crowd erupted. People started shouting questions, demanding answers. Someone yelled about calling a lawyer. Another person mentioned contacting the news. It was chaos. Carol stood in the middle of the street, snowflakes settling on her puffy white coat, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. It's not what you think, she said, but her voice was so quiet now that barely anyone could hear her. My son was going through a hard time. He lost his job, his wife left him, he was about to lose his house. I was just trying to help him get back on his feet. I was going to pay it all back. With what money? Richard demanded. Carol, you committed fraud, multiple counts. You stole from every homeowner in this neighborhood. Do you understand how serious this is? I pulled out my own phone and called our main office. It was early, but our owner services manager, Janet, was always in by 6. She answered on the second ring. Janet, it's Lucas. I need you to pull our payment records for Pinewood Estates immediately. I think we have a situation. I can tell you right now without pulling them, Janet said. They're 60 days past due on 3 invoices. I was going to flag it for collections today. How much do they owe us? $15,200. Plus today's service will put them at $19,800. Why? Because I'm standing in the middle of their neighborhood with about 20 residents who just found out their HOA president has been embezzling funds, and I don't think we're going to see that money anytime soon. Janet swore. Are you serious? Dead serious. What's our legal option here? If they're in breach of contract and we have evidence of fraud, we can file a lien against the HOA and potentially against individual board members who were negligent in their oversight. But Lucas, that's going to be messy and expensive. More messy than this. Hold on. I pulled the phone away from my ear as a Jefferson County Sheriff's deputy pulled up to the scene, lights flashing. Finally, actual law enforcement instead of just threats. The deputy, a young guy named Officer Patterson according to his name tag, got out of his car and surveyed the crowd. Someone want to tell me what's going on here? Everyone started talking at once. Patterson held up his hands. One at a time. You, sir, in the bathrobe, start from the beginning. Richard Morrison gave a surprisingly concise summary of the situation, including the embezzlement allegations, the fake special assessment, and Carol's attempt to chase off the legitimate snow removal company. Patterson took notes, his expression growing more serious as the story went on. When Richard finished, Patterson turned to me. Are you the owner of the snow removal company? Yes, sir. Lucas Wright. We've had a contract with this HOA since October. We're 4 invoices deep and haven't been paid for any of them. Do you have documentation of the contract and the outstanding invoices? Absolutely. I can email them to you right now. Patterson nodded and turned to Carol. Mrs. Hendricks, I'm going to need you to come with me to answer some questions. Am I being arrested? Her voice was small now, nothing like the aggressive woman who had stood in front of my truck 30 minutes ago. Not at this moment, but we need to investigate these allegations. If you refuse to cooperate, then yes, I'll place you under arrest for obstruction. Your choice. Carol looked at the crowd of her neighbors, at Richard and Martin, who had been her fellow board members, at me standing there in my work clothes covered in snow, and something in her just broke. Her shoulders sagged and she nodded. I'll cooperate. I'll tell you everything. I just want everyone to understand that I didn't do this to hurt anyone. I was trying to help my son. Madam, you can explain all that at the station, Patterson said gently but firmly. Let's go. As Patterson led Carol to his patrol car, another deputy arrived, followed by a supervisor. The situation was escalating from a neighborhood dispute to a full criminal investigation. The supervisor, a sergeant named Williams, started taking statements from residents while Patterson transported Carol. I stood there with my crew, watching the sun finally break over the horizon, painting the snow-covered neighborhood in shades of pink and gold. It would have been beautiful if the whole situation wasn't such a disaster. Richard Morrison came over to me, looking exhausted. Mr. Wright, I want to apologize on behalf of the HOA. This is inexcusable. We had no idea Carol was doing any of this. How could you not know? I asked, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. She's been writing checks to her son's fake company for months. We have quarterly financial reviews, not monthly. Carol handled the day-to-day finances as president, and we trusted her. Obviously, that was a mistake. Richard rubbed his face. Look, I know we owe you a lot of money. Can we work something out? That's above my pay grade, I said. You'll need to talk to our legal department and accounts receivable. But Richard, you need to understand something. We're a small business. $20,000 is a significant hit for us. We have employees to pay, equipment to maintain, insurance, fuel costs. We can't just eat that loss. I understand. Is there any way you can finish today's snow removal? I know we have no right to ask, but people need to get to work, and like you said earlier, emergency vehicles need access. I thought about it. The ethical thing to do would be to leave right now. We had no guarantee of payment, and continuing to work would just put us deeper in debt. But looking at the faces of the residents who were gathered around, people who had paid their dues in good faith and were now victims of fraud themselves, I couldn't just leave them stranded. Against my better judgment, we'll finish today's job, I said. But this is the last time we service this neighborhood until we're paid in full for all outstanding invoices. And I'm adding a clause to the contract that requires monthly payment verification from 3 board members going forward. Fair enough. Thank you. My crew and I spent the next 3 hours finishing the snow removal. Word had spread about what happened, and instead of the usual complaints about noise or snow placement, residents kept coming out to thank us and apologize. Several people told me they had no idea Carol wasn't paying contractors and offered to help however they could. One elderly woman, Mrs. Patterson, brought out thermoses of hot coffee and homemade cookies for my whole crew. "You boys are angels for finishing the job after what Carol put you through," she said. "That woman always was too big for her britches, but I never thought she'd actually steal from us." By the time we finished Pinewood Estates and moved on to our remaining neighborhoods, it was past 9 in the morning. We were hours behind schedule, exhausted and facing a significant financial loss. But at least the job was done. Over the next few weeks, the situation with Pinewood Estates HOA unfolded like a true crime documentary. Carol Hendricks was charged with multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and misuse of 911 services. The investigation revealed that she had stolen over $70,000 from the HOA over the course of 18 months, funneling it to her son's various fake companies. Her son, Carol Hendricks Jr., was also charged as an accomplice. Turned out, he knew exactly where the money was coming from, and had even helped his mother create false invoices to cover their tracks. The story made local news, with several stations picking up the angle of the HOA president, who called 911 on a legitimate snow removal company to cover up her embezzlement scheme. Our company got some unexpected publicity out of it, which was nice, but we still had the problem of the outstanding invoices. The Pinewood Estates HOA, now under new leadership with Richard Morrison serving as interim president, filed for a special loan from their management company to cover immediate expenses. They also filed a lawsuit against Carol and her son to recover the stolen funds. But legal processes move slowly, and we needed to be paid. Our attorney advised us to file a lien against the HOA, which we did. It was an uncomfortable situation because we didn't want to punish the residents for Carol's crimes, but we also couldn't afford to lose $20,000. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. About 3 weeks after the incident, I got a call from a woman named Nancy Sullivan. She was a reporter for a Denver news station who had been following the story. "Mr. Wright, I'd like to do a feature on your company," she said. The small business that got caught up in HOA fraud. I think it would resonate with a lot of people. I was hesitant. We'd already gotten plenty of attention, and I wasn't sure more publicity would help. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure what good it would do. We're still out nearly 20 grand, and until we see that money, we're operating at a loss. "That's exactly why I want to do the story," Nancy said. "There's been a lot of coverage about Carol Hendricks and what she did, but nobody's talking about the victims beyond the homeowners. You're running a legitimate business, employing people, providing an essential service, and you got screwed over by someone abusing their authority. That's a story people need to hear. What if it backfires? What if people think we're greedy for trying to collect payment we're legally owed?" "Then those people are idiots," Nancy said bluntly. Look, I've been a reporter for 15 years. I know how to frame a story to be fair and accurate. I'm not going to make you look bad. I want to make Carol Hendricks look bad because what she did was wrong on multiple levels. I talked it over with my business partner, my sister Linda, who handled most of the administrative side of the company. She thought it was a good idea. We need public support, Linda said. If this goes to court, which it probably will, having positive public opinion on our side could help. Plus, it might pressure the HOA or their insurance company to settle faster. So I agreed to the interview. Nancy came to our office with a camera crew, interviewed me and several of my employees, and even rode along on one of our service calls to show what we actually do. The piece aired 2 days later during prime time. The response was overwhelming. Our office phone rang nonstop with messages of support. Several other HOAs reached out to offer us contracts, specifically mentioning that they appreciated our professionalism in a difficult situation. Someone even started a GoFundMe to help cover our losses, though we politely declined and asked them to donate to a local small business relief fund instead. But the most important call came from Pinewood Estates Insurance Company. Apparently, the HOA had a bond that covered board member malfeasance up to $100,000. The insurance adjuster had seen Nancy's news report and realized that our company was also a victim of Carol's fraud. "Mr. Wright, we'd like to settle your outstanding invoices immediately," the adjuster said. "We'll cut you a check for the full amount plus interest and reasonable legal fees. All we need is for you to sign a release stating that your claim against the HOA is satisfied." I almost fell out of my chair. Seriously, just like that, just like that. The evidence against Mrs. Hendricks is overwhelming, and you clearly provided the services you're claiming payment for. This is an easy decision from our perspective. We'll be going after the Hendricks family to recover our payout, but that's not your problem. The check arrived 5 days later. $20,400, covering all outstanding invoices plus 3 months of interest. It felt like winning the lottery. I called Richard Morrison to let him know. "Richard, just wanted to give you a heads up that the insurance company settled our claim. We're square now, and if you guys want to resume the snow removal contract next season, we'd be happy to work with you." "That's great news, Lucas. And yes, we'd definitely like to continue working with you. The new board has implemented a bunch of financial oversight measures, and we're requiring monthly audits going forward. What Carol did will never happen again under our watch. I believe you. Listen, I know this has been a nightmare for everyone in your neighborhood. How are people holding up?" Richard sighed. "It's been tough. A lot of people feel betrayed, myself included. Carol was our neighbor for over a decade. We had barbecues together, our kids played together. Finding out she was stealing from us the whole time, it changes how you see people. For what it's worth, I think she really did start with good intentions, trying to help her son. She just made terrible choices and then kept making worse choices to cover up the first ones. That's generous of you, considering she cost you so much money and stress. I got paid in the end, and honestly, the publicity has been good for business. We've picked up 6 new contracts since this whole thing went down. So in a weird way, Carol's fraud actually helped us. Well, I'm glad something good came out of this mess. The criminal case against Carol and her son took longer to resolve. Carol accepted a plea deal that included 5 years of probation, full restitution to the HOA and affected contractors, and 500 hours of community service. She also had to resign from the HOA board permanently and was barred from serving on any HOA board in Colorado. Her son got a harsher sentence because he had a prior fraud conviction from years earlier. He was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, followed by 3 years of probation and restitution payments. The Pinewood Estates HOA used the insurance payout and the recovered funds from the Hendricks family to repay the special assessment to residents. Nobody got wealthy from it, but at least people got their money back. As for my company, we implemented new policies for all HOA contracts. Monthly payment verification from at least 2 board members. Automatic late fees after 30 days. And a clause that allows us to suspend service immediately if payment is more than 45 days overdue. We also started running background checks on HOA board members before signing contracts, which several other contractors told us was smart but paranoid. I figured better paranoid than broke. The story didn't end there, though. About 6 months after the initial incident, I got another interesting phone call. This time it was from the Jefferson County District Attorney's Office. "Mr. Wright, this is Assistant DA Michael Torres. I'm working on the Hendricks case, and I was hoping you might be able to help us with something." "Sure. What do you need?" "We've been investigating Carol Hendricks' financial records, and we found something disturbing. It appears she was running a similar scheme with at least 2 other HOAs in Jefferson County. We've identified unpaid contractors, fake special assessments, and shell companies receiving payments. The thing is, we need someone from the contracting side to testify about standard practices and how these schemes work. Would you be willing to serve as an expert witness?" I had never testified in court before, but I felt obligated to help. "Absolutely. Whatever you need." Over the next few months, I worked with the DA's office to prepare testimony about HOA contracts, standard payment practices, and red flags that might indicate fraud. It turned out Carol had been serving on multiple HOA boards simultaneously, using her position as president of Pinewood Estates to gain credibility with other communities. In total, she had stolen over $200,000 from 3 different HOAs. Her son had helped with one of them, but the other 2 schemes she had run alone, using different fake companies and more sophisticated methods. The additional charges meant Carol's plea deal was revoked. The case went to trial, and I testified about our experience with Pinewood Estates and the industry standards for HOA contracts. It was nerve-wracking sitting in that witness box, with Carol's defense attorney trying to suggest that our company had somehow been negligent for not catching the fraud sooner. "Mr. Wright, isn't it true that your company continued to provide services even after payment was significantly overdue?" the defense attorney asked. "Yes, but only for one additional service call," I replied. "We were at 60 days past due when the fraud was discovered. Our standard practice is to flag accounts at 45 days and suspend service at 60. We were in the process of doing exactly that when everything came to light. But you did continue to work that morning, even after Mrs. Hendricks asked you to leave. Couldn't that be seen as trespassing?" "No, because we had a valid contract and authorization from other board members. Mrs. Hendricks didn't have the authority to unilaterally cancel a contract that the full board had approved. But as president of the HOA, didn't she have executive authority?" "Not according to the HOA bylaws, which require a majority board vote to terminate vendor contracts. I've read the bylaws, Your Honor. I always do before signing a contract." The judge nodded appreciatively at that detail. The defense attorney moved on to other questions, but I could tell he wasn't making the progress he wanted. The trial lasted a week. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, filing false documents, and misuse of emergency services for that original 911 call. This time, Carol was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay full restitution to all affected HOAs and contractors, which totaled over $250,000 including fees and interest. I felt a complex mix of emotions watching her being led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. On one hand, she had committed serious crimes and deserved to be punished. On the other hand, she was a woman who had made catastrophically bad choices while trying to help her struggling son, and now both their lives were essentially ruined. After the trial, several reporters wanted to interview me again. I declined most of them, but I did agree to talk to Nancy Sullivan one more time. "Lucas, you were the catalyst that brought down a multi-HOA fraud scheme," Nancy said during the interview. "If your crew hadn't been working that morning, if Carol hadn't called 911, this might have continued for years. How does that feel?" "Honestly, it feels weird," I said. "We were just trying to plow snow and do our job. We didn't set out to expose fraud or become whistleblowers. We just refused to be pushed around by someone abusing their authority." That's exactly what makes this story compelling. You're an ordinary business owner who stood up for yourself when it would have been easier to just leave. A lot of people would have driven away when Carol demanded it, just to avoid conflict. Maybe, but that would have been wrong. We had a contract. We had a right to be there. Sometimes you have to stand your ground even when someone with perceived authority is trying to intimidate you. The interview aired, and once again our phones lit up with calls. But this time it wasn't just support and new contracts. Several other contractors reached out to tell me about their own experiences with difficult or potentially fraudulent HOAs. A landscaping company said they had been stiffed on $20,000 by an HOA whose president claimed the work was substandard, even though the contract had been fulfilled. A roofing company reported being pressured to kick back 10% of their contract value to a board member as a consulting fee. A pool maintenance company discovered that the HOA president had been charging residents for weekly service, but had secretly changed the contract to biweekly service, pocketing the difference. I realized that what happened to us wasn't an isolated incident. HOA fraud was a widespread problem, but most small contractors didn't have the resources or knowledge to fight back. Many just wrote off the losses as the cost of doing business. That realization led to the creation of the Jefferson County Contractors Alliance, a nonprofit organization I founded with several other local business owners. Our mission was simple: provide resources, legal support, and education to help contractors protect themselves from fraud and abuse by HOAs and other organizations. We held quarterly meetings where contractors could share experiences and advice. We created template contracts with strong protective language. We compiled a database of HOA board members who had been involved in fraud or other unethical behavior. And we lobbied for stronger state laws around HOA financial transparency and accountability. The work was time-consuming and mostly unpaid, but it felt important. If our experience with Carol Hendricks could prevent even one other small business from being victimized, it would be worth it. My sister Linda became the executive director of the Alliance, handling the day-to-day operations while I focused on running our snow removal company. The organization grew faster than we expected, with over 100 member businesses within the first year. We also started working with homeowners associations on the other side, offering training for board members on proper financial management, vendor relations, and ethical leadership. Many HOAs were eager for this kind of guidance, wanting to ensure they didn't end up in the headlines like Pinewood Estates. Richard Morrison became one of our strongest advocates. He joined the Alliance Board and helped develop our HOA training program, using his experience with Carol's fraud to illustrate what can go wrong when proper oversight fails. The hardest lesson I learned from all this is that trust without verification is just negligence, Richard told a room full of HOA board members at one of our training sessions. We trusted Carol because she was our neighbor and our friend. But friendship should never replace proper financial controls and accountability. 2 years after the initial incident, I was invited to speak at a national conference for HOA managers in Phoenix. The conference organizers wanted me to talk about fraud prevention and contractor relations. Standing at that podium, looking out at an audience of several hundred HOA professionals, I thought back to that freezing February morning when Carol Hendricks stood in front of my truck, demanding we leave her neighborhood. If someone had told me then that her 911 call would lead to criminal convictions, an advocacy organization, and national speaking engagements, I would have thought they were crazy. But that's how change happens sometimes. Not through grand plans or calculated moves, but through ordinary people refusing to accept being treated unfairly, and then building something positive from the experience. My presentation focused on 3 key points: the importance of transparency in HOA finances, the need for proper vendor agreements and payment practices, and the warning signs that might indicate fraud or mismanagement. I shared our story, including the parts where we made mistakes and could have protected ourselves better. The response was enthusiastic. During the Q&A session, dozens of hands shot up. "What's the most important clause you include in your contracts now?" one person asked. "Monthly payment verification from multiple board members," I answered. "It takes an extra 5 minutes each month, but it ensures that money is actually flowing where it's supposed to flow. If a board member can't or won't verify payment, that's an immediate red flag." How do you handle situations where an HOA wants to negotiate payment terms that seem suspicious? Another person asked. "We don't. Our terms are our terms. Net 30, no exceptions. If an HOA can't meet those terms, they're not the right client for us." I learned the hard way that flexibility with payment often leads to problems. After the conference, several attendees approached me privately to share their own fraud stories. A woman from California told me about an HOA president who had embezzled $500,000 over 6 years. A man from Florida described a scheme where board members were getting kickbacks from contractors in exchange for awarding inflated contracts. The stories were depressing, but also motivating. There was clearly a need for more awareness and better systems to prevent this type of abuse. When I returned to Denver, I met with Linda and the rest of the Alliance Board to discuss expanding our mission nationally. It was a big step, requiring significant resources and organizational changes, but we all felt it was necessary. "We've proven the model works here in Jefferson County," Linda said. "We've helped dozens of contractors recover money, prevented fraud through early detection, and improved relationships between contractors and HOAs. Why not take this national?" We spent the next 6 months developing a plan for expansion. We created an online platform where contractors across the country could access resources, report suspicious activity, and connect with others in their area. We partnered with legal aid organizations to provide affordable legal support. And we began developing a certification program for HOAs that met certain standards of financial transparency and ethical management. The work was exhausting but rewarding. And through it all, I kept running Wright Snow Removal, because that's what this was all about: protecting small businesses like mine. 3 years after Carol Hendricks called 911 on my snow removal crew, I found myself back at Pinewood Estates. Not for snow removal this time, but for a community appreciation event. The HOA, under new leadership, wanted to honor the contractors who had continued to serve the neighborhood despite everything that happened. It was a Saturday afternoon in June, warm and sunny, with kids running around and families grilling burgers. Richard Morrison gave a speech thanking all the contractors and acknowledging the hard lessons the community had learned. "We took our HOA for granted," Richard said. "We assumed the board was handling things properly, and we didn't ask enough questions. Carol Hendricks took advantage of that complacency, but ultimately, we all share some responsibility for creating an environment where that kind of fraud was possible. We're committed to doing better, and I hope our experience can help others avoid the same mistakes." After the speeches, I spent the afternoon talking with residents, many of whom I recognized from that chaotic morning 3 years earlier. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who had brought us coffee, gave me a huge hug and insisted I try her potato salad. "You know, that terrible situation ended up bringing this community closer together," she said. "We realized we needed to pay more attention, get more involved. Our HOA meetings used to have maybe 10 people show up. Now we regularly get 50 or 60. People care about what's happening in their neighborhood." That observation stuck with me. Maybe that was the silver lining to the whole mess. Sometimes it takes a crisis to wake people up and make them realize they can't just assume everything is being handled properly. Vigilance and engagement matter. As the sun set and the party wound down, I stood at the entrance to Pinewood Estates, looking at the freshly painted gate and well-maintained landscaping. The neighborhood looked better than it had 3 years ago, and not just physically. There was a sense of community pride that seemed stronger now. Tommy, my employee who had been in the truck that morning, walked over to join me. He wasn't a nervous 19-year-old anymore. He was 22 now, and I just promoted him to crew supervisor. "Hey boss, this is pretty cool, huh?" Tommy said. "Who would have thought that crazy morning would lead to all this? Not me, that's for sure. I just wanted to plow some snow and get paid." "Yeah, but you did more than that. You stood up to someone who was abusing their power and you didn't back down even when it got uncomfortable." "That matters." I shrugged, feeling a bit embarrassed by the praise. "I just did what made sense at the time." "That's what makes it authentic," Tommy said. "You weren't trying to be a hero or make a statement. You were just doing your job and refusing to be pushed around." Sometimes that's exactly what the situation needs. As we drove away from Pinewood Estates that evening, I thought about everything that had happened since that February morning. The investigation, the trial, the publicity, the alliance, the national expansion. It had been a wild ride, and it all started because Carol Hendricks called 911 on a legitimate snow removal company. The dispatcher's response, that we were the only licensed company that could legally service the neighborhood, had been the first domino. That simple fact had undermined Carol's entire attempt to chase us away, and in her panic, she had said things that exposed the fraud. If the dispatcher had just sent a police officer to sort it out, things might have played out very differently. I thought about calling that dispatcher, Jennifer, to thank her for being thorough and professional that night. But I didn't even know her last name, and it felt weird to call 911 dispatch just to say thanks for doing your job well 3 years ago. Instead, I made a mental note to include the role of emergency dispatchers in our next training presentation. They're part of the system of checks and balances that can catch fraud and abuse, but only if they're properly informed and empowered to question suspicious calls. The following winter was busy for Wright Snow Removal. We had expanded our service area and added 4 new trucks to handle the increased contracts. The Contractors Alliance was thriving, with chapters forming in 6 states, and I had just been interviewed for a book about HOA fraud and reform. Life was good, but I never forgot how precarious things had been during those weeks when we were owed $20,000 and had no guarantee we'd ever see it. Small businesses operate on thin margins, and a single bad client can cause serious damage. That's why the work we were doing with the Alliance felt so important. Every contractor we helped, every HOA we trained, every piece of fraud we prevented, it all added up to a more fair and transparent system. One snowy morning in December, 4 years after the original incident, I was driving through a neighborhood we'd recently signed a contract with when I saw an HOA board member standing in the street, flagging me down. My first instinct was suspicion, wondering if this was going to be another Carol Hendricks situation, but when I rolled down my window, the woman was smiling and holding a thermos. "Hi, you must be from Wright Snow Removal. I'm Patricia Chen, HOA Treasurer. I just wanted to introduce myself and make sure you have my phone number. Per our contract, I'll be verifying payment each month. Also, I brought coffee. Figured you guys could use something warm on a morning like this." I accepted the coffee gratefully and shook her hand. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I appreciate the introduction and the coffee." "No problem. And thank you for the thorough onboarding process you did with our board. That training on financial management and contractor relations was incredibly helpful. I've been on HOA boards before, but nobody ever explained things as clearly as your team did." As I drove away, sipping the hot coffee, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This is what it should be like: mutual respect, clear communication, proper procedures. The nightmare with Carol Hendricks had taught me what can go wrong, but experiences like this reminded me that most people want to do the right thing. They just need proper systems and education. The years continued to pass, and the Alliance kept growing. We published research papers on HOA fraud prevention, worked with state legislatures to strengthen laws, and helped hundreds of contractors recover money from fraudulent HOAs. We also helped HOAs identify and remove board members who were engaging in unethical behavior. Carol Hendricks was released from prison after serving 3 years of her 4-year sentence. I heard through Richard Morrison that she had moved to another state to live with relatives, wanting a fresh start away from the community she had betrayed. Her son had also been released and was reportedly working as a warehouse supervisor, trying to rebuild his life. I didn't feel any particular animosity toward them anymore. What they did was wrong, and they paid the legal price for their crimes. Holding on to anger beyond that seemed pointless. Instead, I focused on the positive changes that had come from the experience. The Alliance had helped over 300 contractors recover a combined total of more than $4 million in unpaid invoices. We trained thousands of HOA board members in proper financial management. And we'd successfully lobbied for legislation in 8 states requiring annual financial audits for HOAs over a certain size. On the 5th anniversary of that fateful 911 call, Nancy Sullivan did a follow-up feature on our story. She interviewed me, Richard Morrison, several Alliance members, and even managed to get a statement from the original 911 dispatcher, Jennifer Martinez, who confirmed that she remembered the call and was glad her decision to question the situation had helped expose the fraud. "That call always stuck with me," Jennifer said in the interview. "Something about the caller's story just didn't add up. A legitimate snow removal company wouldn't be out there illegally." So I looked up the county requirements and found that Wright Snow Removal was actually the only company that could legally do the job. When I told the caller that, she got even more agitated, which confirmed my suspicion that something else was going on. The feature aired during prime time and included updates on everyone involved. Carol and her son declined to be interviewed, but Nancy included information about their sentences and release. The piece ended with a segment about the alliance and the reforms we'd helped implement. The response was even bigger than the original story. Our website crashed from the traffic, and we received thousands of emails from contractors and HOA members across the country sharing their own experiences and asking for help. Linda and I worked around the clock for weeks, responding to inquiries and setting up new chapters. It was overwhelming but also validating. The work we'd been doing mattered, and people were paying attention. 10 years after Carol Hendricks called 911 on my snow removal crew, I decided to step back from day-to-day operations of both the company and the alliance. I was 53 years old, and I wanted to spend more time with my family and maybe do some traveling. Tommy, the young kid who'd been in the truck with me that morning, was now 32 and had become a part owner of Wright Snow Removal. He'd proven himself to be an excellent manager and had earned the opportunity to lead the company forward. Linda continued as executive director of the alliance, which now had chapters in 32 states and had helped recover over $20 million in fraudulent charges and unpaid invoices. The reforms we'd advocated for had been adopted in 15 states, requiring regular audits, multiple signatures on large checks, and transparent financial reporting for HOAs. It wasn't perfect, and fraud still happened, but it was significantly harder to pull off than it used to be. Looking back on everything that stemmed from that 911 call, I remained amazed at how a single moment of standing my ground had rippled into something so much larger. If I'd driven away when Carol demanded it, none of this would have happened. The fraud would have continued, other contractors would have been victimized, and nothing would have changed. But I didn't drive away. I stood in the snow at 4:30 in the morning and calmly explained that I had every right to be there. That one decision, that refusal to be intimidated, had set everything else in motion. I hoped that our story would inspire others to stand up for themselves when faced with abuse of authority, whether from an HOA board member, a government official, or anyone else who tries to use their position to push people around. Sometimes the system works, but only if people are willing to engage with it and demand accountability. The dispatcher who confirmed we were the only licensed company, the board members who questioned Carol's actions, the reporters who covered the story, the prosecutors who built the case, the legislators who reformed the laws. All of them played a role, but it started with refusing to accept being treated unfairly. That's the lesson I took from the whole experience. One person standing up can start a chain reaction that leads to real change. It might not happen overnight, and it might not be easy, but it's possible. And sometimes, all it takes is refusing to drive away when someone tells you to leave a place you have every right to be.